On this bus, nothing could touch you.
But Metallica's wild ride would soon come crashing to a halt.
Later on that night, at about 5 or 6 in the morning, I heard a skidding, and then this motion. I thought we were going off a cliff.
Cliff needed a new Walkman. That really dates the story. We get arrested. The cops think because we had long hair, we must be carrying drugs.
He was regarded as one of the most talented bass players in heavy metal. With his innovative style and fearless approach, Burton helped define what Metallica would become. However, his tragic passing in 1986 remains one of the band's darkest chapters. For Lars Ulrich, Cliff's loss has always been a difficult subject. Known for keeping his emotions private, Lars has rarely shared his thoughts about Burton, choosing instead to let his music speak. But now, decades later, Lars shared his thoughts about Cliff's immense influence on Metallica's early years and how his memory continues to guide the band. When Metallica discovered Cliff Burton in 1982, he was playing in the San Francisco band Trauma. What immediately caught their attention was Burton's unconventional approach to bass. He wasn't just keeping rhythm, he was creating melodies and pushing the instrument beyond what most metal musicians were doing at the time. His use of effects, like distortion and the wah-wah pedal, gave his playing a character that felt fresh and unique. Bringing Burton into the band wasn't a straightforward process. Cliff made it clear that if he was going to join Metallica, they would need to relocate from Los Angeles to San Francisco, where he felt the scene was more authentic and supportive of their music. Metallica, desperate to secure Burton's talents, agreed. In hindsight, this move would not only secure their lineup, but also connect the band with a thriving Bay Area thrash metal scene, which became instrumental in their rise. Burton's impact was felt immediately. Lars Ulrich has mentioned in interviews, including that Cliff brought a different energy to the band, one that was grounded in both his technical skill and his wide-ranging musical influences. Burton's love for artists like Thin Lizzy, Rush, and even classical composers helped expand Metallica's creative direction. Ulrich noted that Cliff was the first guy who showed us that music didn't have limits. It didn't all have to be fast and aggressive. This influence became apparent on Metallica's debut album, Kill 'Em All. While much of the material had already been written before Burton joined, his presence on tracks like Anesthesia Pulling Teeth, a bass solo that Ulrich later referred to as mind-blowing, set him apart from bass players of the era. The track wasn't just a showcase of technical ability, it was a statement that Metallica wasn't afraid to experiment. But Burton's contributions weren't just about solos or technical skills. He quickly became a key voice in the songwriting process, helping the band structure their songs in ways that were more dynamic and complex. James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich would bring in riffs and ideas, but Cliff would often suggest changes that added depth, whether by rearranging sections or weaving in melodic elements. On Ride the Lightning, this became especially clear with tracks like The Call of Cthulhu, where his influence on the layered melodic sound helped reshape what Metallica could do as a band. Despite his talent, Burton wasn't known for being overly vocal or dominant in the band dynamic. He was respected, but had a quiet confidence that didn't require constant validation. Lars Ulrich once reflected in the classic album's documentary for Metallica. Cliff wasn't about ego. He didn't need to talk big or show off. He just let the music do the talking, and that was enough. As Metallica entered their next phase, Burton's presence became more integral to how they evolved. More than a bass player, he was a creative force who subtly pushed the band toward their full potential without ever overshadowing the collective effort. On September 27, 1986, Metallica's momentum came to a sudden and devastating halt. While traveling through Sweden during their European tour to promote Master of Puppets, their tour bus skidded off an icy road, overturning in the early hours of the morning. Cliff Burton, who was sleeping in the top bunk near a window, was tragically killed in the crash. He was just 24 years old. The accident sent a shockwave not only through the band, but also through the metal community at large. For Metallica, Burton's death was an unimaginable loss. Lars Ulrich has often avoided discussing that morning in detail, describing it as a blur of confusion and disbelief. In later interviews, including one with Metal Hammer magazine, he reflected, "There's no textbook on how to deal with something like that. It just shattered everything." The immediate aftermath of the crash plunged the band into chaos. At that point, Metallica was still rising through the ranks, building their reputation on relentless touring and tightly knit band dynamics. Losing someone as integral as Burton not only brought that trajectory into question, but also threatened the cohesion of the group. Ulrich later admitted that there was a part of him that wondered if Metallica could, or should, continue at all. While grief consumed the band in the weeks following the tragedy, decisions had to be made. The harsh reality of being on tour meant that stopping entirely wasn't an option if they wanted to maintain momentum. Just a month after the crash, Metallica began auditions for a new bassist. Ulrich has said that those weeks felt like a blur. "You're going through the motions, but nothing feels real." The decision to move forward was not without internal conflict. Some fans criticized the band for seeking Burton's replacement so quickly, though the band members themselves have stated repeatedly that their willingness to carry on was more about honoring Cliff's dedication to the music than ignoring their grief. Hetfield noted in the 2004 documentary Some Kind of Monster, "Cliff wouldn't have wanted us to stop. He was about the music, and we had to keep going for him." While not as vocal, this sentiment was shared by Ulrich, who insisted that persistence was the only way to make sense of such a senseless loss. For Lars, the loss was particularly complicated. While their relationship wasn't marked by deep personal friendship, there was a mutual respect, particularly in their creative processes. Burton's absence left an undeniable void, both in the music-making and the band dynamic. His insistence on exploring uncharted musical territory had become a cornerstone of the band's evolution, and Ulrich acknowledged that finding someone who could fill even part of that role was an impossible task. The addition of Jason Newsted marked a new chapter for Metallica, but Burton's absence was never far from their minds. Cliff Burton's death didn't just affect Metallica as musicians, it also hardened them as individuals. The vulnerability and naivety that characterized their early years seemed to fade after the accident, replaced with a sharper, more intense focus on their careers. From this point forward, the band became known not just for their music, but for their resilience in the face of tragedy. Lars has described this turning point as an unwanted but defining lesson. You learn that things don't always go the way you think, and you have to move forward no matter how impossible it feels. Burton's loss marked both an end and a beginning for Metallica. While his death was a devastating blow, it also became a catalyst for the band's survival instinct, shaping how they confronted later challenges in their career. For Lars Ulrich, the memories of that bus crash remain painful, but they serve as a reminder of what drives Metallica to this day, the commitment to the music Cliff believed in so passionately. Cliff Burton's influence on Metallica didn't end with his death. Even as the band moved forward, his approach to music and the ideas he had introduced continued to shape their direction. For Lars Ulrich, this wasn't just about specific contributions, but about the way Burton had fundamentally changed how the band viewed their own creativity. As Ulrich explained in an interview with Classic Rock magazine in 2009, "Cliff taught us that you don't have to fear stepping outside the box. He was the one always pushing us to take risks, and we've carried that with us ever since." One of the clearest examples of Burton's lingering impact came through on Injustice for All, the first album Metallica released after his death. While Jason Newsted had entered the fold as bassist, the album's intricate arrangements and dark tonal shifts bore Burton's mark, particularly in songs like "To Live Is to Die." This instrumental track included lyrical fragments written by Burton himself before his death, making it both a tribute and a reminder of the depth he brought to their music. Ulrich later described the track as a way to keep Cliff a part of what we were doing, even after he was gone. But beyond songwriting, what Burton left behind was a mindset that challenged the band to always explore and refine their sound. Lars has often emphasized that Burton's ability to think beyond heavy riffs and thrash intensity had shaped his own approach to drumming, making him more aware of dynamics and composition. According to Ulrich in a recent interview with Ultimate Classic Rock, Burton's consistent reminder to think of the bigger picture in music helped influence the band's progression from raw thrash metal to a more expansive sound. Burton's creative ethos also became a guiding force for how Metallica viewed their legacy. Lars Ulrich acknowledged that Cliff's influence wasn't something they spoke about often as a band, but it was always present in their decisions. Cliff was never someone who would look back, Ulrich stated in Metal Hammer in 2013. If he were here, I think he'd still be pushing us to do new things and explore new ideas. However, Ulrich's reflection hasn't been without moments of self-critique. There's been public debate over the absence of bass in And Justice for All, which many interpret as a form of negligence toward Newsted's role in the band. Lars has responded to these critiques transparently, noting that the decision wasn't a slight to Newsted, but a result of their grief-driven insistence on amplifying the guitars and drums over everything else. In Ulrich's own words, "We were still figuring out how to carry on without Cliff. Maybe we didn't get it right, but everything we did with the best intentions to honor what we thought he'd want." Ultimately, Cliff Burton's creative legacy continues to ripple through Metallica's work, even decades later. From their willingness to experiment to the way they structure their music, his philosophy remains a quiet but enduring presence in their artistry. For Lars Ulrich, Burton's influence isn't about looking back nostalgically, it's about carrying forward a perspective that always strives for something greater. Decades after his passing, Cliff Burton's memory remains an integral part of Metallica's identity. While the band rarely speaks excessively about his influence, they've found ways to honor him, both publicly and privately, throughout their career. For Lars Ulrich, this isn't about nostalgia or dwelling on what was lost, but about preserving Burton's contributions as part of the band's legacy in a respectful and understated way. One such tribute is Cliff Burton Day, officially recognized in Alameda County, California, Cliff's hometown, on February 10th, Burton's birthday. When the day was established in 2018, Lars expressed his gratitude to fans and the local community, stating, "The amount of love and support for Cliff over the years has been incredible. It's a reminder of how much he meant, not just to us, but to so many people around the world." For Metallica's live performances, there have also been moments where Burton's presence is acknowledged. While the band doesn't explicitly dedicate entire songs or sets to him, instrumentals such as Orion often feel like silent tributes. Lars Ulrich once mentioned in a recent interview with Mojo that playing these songs live keeps Burton's essence alive. When we play something like Orion, it's hard not to think about who helped bring those moments to life. It's like he's still with us in those notes. Beyond the stage, Metallica made sure Burton's contributions were more permanently memorialized within the metal community. His induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2009 alongside Metallica was another moment of recognition. Accepting the honor, the band reflected briefly on his influence and importance, with Jason Newsted even sharing kind words about the inspiration Burton provided, despite never meeting him directly. Lars, as always, chose a more subtle acknowledgement, respecting Cliff's memory without turning it into a grand spectacle. Perhaps more than any public tribute, Metallica's continued evolution as a band has been their greatest way of honoring Burton. Ulrich has stated in interviews over the years that the band's willingness to explore and innovate stems, in part, from Burton's fearless creativity. "Cliff wouldn't want us to be a band that just plays it safe," Lars told Metal Hammer in 2013. "Continuing to take risks feels like the biggest respect we can show to his legacy.